Good afternoon. Welcome to the press briefing of the EMEA's Business Services Landscape report. My name is Paweł Panchy and I represent the Association of Business Service Leaders, which is ABSL, and it's one of the authors responsible for the report. ABSL, together with Deloitte, JLL, and Randstad, is presenting the EMEA's Business Services Landscape, which presents on one hand, the well-established locations of business services sector in Europe. On the other hand, we are introducing some of the new locations that came up in the last couple of years. We will try to present the data that will position the EMEA region as a location for business services sector. The agenda of today's meeting will be as such. We will do a short intro of the report by Wojciech Popławski from ABSL Poland and Olaf Babinet from Deloitte. And then we'll move on to the questions that will be asked by the journalists. Let me introduce the experts that we have present at this briefing. Deloitte is represented by Candice Sieg, Director at Deloitte UK, and Olaf Babinet, Director at Deloitte Consulting Global Location Strategy Europe. Rafał Szajewski, Business Location Consulting Director for EMEA, will be speaking on behalf of JLL. And Randstad is represented by Tania De Decker, Managing Director, Randstad Enterprise Group. ABSL countries are represented by heads of few significant business players, but we'll be continuing with their ABSL titles. So Anna Berczyńska is ABSL Poland Vice President for Talent. Ota Kulhanek is a Director and is a President of ABSL Czech Republic. Dragor Stefan is a President of ABSL Romania. And Wojtek Popławski is a Vice President for Business Intelligence and Thought Leadership. We also have with us representatives of two other locations that has ABSL. Freddy Zbikovs is the Chairman of the Board of ABSL Latvia, and Adnan Behnen is the President of ABSL Bosnia and Herzegovina. The report that we are presenting today provides information on 18 countries with key data on talent, real estate, and the growth and maturity of the sector. We would like to start this event also by providing a couple of technical information. If you want to better view what you see, you can switch to the full screen mode by clicking the full screen icon in the right bottom of the stream window. You can also find complete information on the whole event and the report itself on the reports and events webpage. And you can ask the questions either live or you can submit them by filling in the box under the streaming window. Please remember, whoever wants to be active, to pin the view in your laptop so you can be an active participant of the event. Okay, so right now, without further delay, we would like to move on to presenting the key takeaways from the report. Wojtek and Olaf, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paweł. First of all, it's a great pleasure to welcome our European media community on this briefing. And maybe before I hand over to my distinguished colleague Olaf, I wanted to share a couple of trends that in my view will be impacting EMEA region significantly over the next couple of years, and actually it will depend on us what position the region will take in the global sourcing and business services ecosystem. So first of all, we believe that especially in the time of crisis, the smart digitization with an accent on smart is going to really help us marginalizing the labor arbitrage component that has been quite important factor around the location selection for years. And we believe that a lot of needs to happen also in the minds, in the way the individual center leads, service center leads, manage their position, or actually how they fight for the position of the global center in the overall company agenda. First of all, we believe that focus on end-to-end processes and pushing organization that centers can take on more help actually release and actually freed up a lot of trapped value that is actually sitting in the upstream processes that are not often moved into the service centers. As well, the innovation agenda that will be significant component to support the thinking how to take the best way into the smart corporation and smart digitization framework. And lastly, we still believe that there will be further consolidation on the market. So a number of centers will be using the ecosystem partners, also outsourcing providers, to help them transform and drive better optimization and digitization across the end-to-end processes that are managed by the centers. And there will be more very interesting hybrid models where actually take the existing business center more into the middle office and command center role that will create absolutely significant opportunity for EMEA, where the sourcing industry will definitely change, and EMEA can really play the role. But as it's been even mentioned during the discussion today, it's up to us how we take it forward. So with that said, Olaf, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks for Czech, and thanks to all the journalists for the time today. So I do indeed have 5 points to go through, and these 5 points are basically a kind of summary of the report which will be made available to you today. The first point is, and that's a good news for actually all of us, is that the business service sector continues to thrive and continues to grow. So since our last report, there might have been a growth of probably 200 to 250,000 more jobs in the sector, and probably 600 to 700 new business service centers have opened. As a kind of example, the Poland has probably added 100,000 more jobs, FTEs, to the total number of FTEs in the business service sectors. Hungary, probably 30,000, Romania 50,000, and I can go through the list, but basically all the countries covered in the report have experienced a growth in the sector. The second point is that, of course, within these 18 countries, we have mature countries and emerging countries, and we are still seeing a growth for traditional countries for business services to be hosted. However, we are also seeing countries emerging more and more as a good choice, especially in the IT business actually. But countries like Egypt, countries like Tunisia, like Morocco, also closer to us. Maybe I can also make a point about Ukraine. So there is a wider choice for business service sector to decide where to set up new operation or where to expand operation. The third point is that within each country, of course, you have tier 1 locations, but more and more companies are looking at tier 2 and even tier 3 locations. Maybe in tier 3 locations, there will be setting up new operations less complex than in tier 1 and mature locations. But we see a wider appetite or an increased appetite for companies to at least test more cities than the traditional list of usual candidate cities we have in the past. The fourth point is that there will be a growing interest to look at now, because this oil market is very tense, and all the markets are tight in terms of job availability. Companies are intend to still think about cost, but they are open to go to cities where the constraints on labor force is a bit less important, and even if costs are higher. So we have seen more activities in location, sometimes even in Western Europe, where we all know that costs are most of the time higher than other parts of the EU. But given the environment they offer, given the quality of life they offer, you have that also in Eastern Europe, of course, but the companies are more and more open to look at these additional factors, because at the end of the day, that's where the labor force will go. And finally, the cost. What we see, it's quite interesting. I mean, when I started in the business 20 years ago, and even 10 years ago, and even 5 or 6 years ago, we were used to talk about cost gap differences between cities, between major cities, or between countries first, within Eastern Europe, or within even Western Europe. So, for example, we were used to say that there was a 40% cost gap between some countries like Poland and other countries like maybe Bulgaria or even Romania. Over the years, over the past 5 years, this gap has kind of narrowed down, and we see still some difference in level of cost, but smaller and smaller. And this cost difference gap between countries, we see also that this cost difference gap is also decreasing within each country. So in the past, there was also a difference between the capital and tier 2 and tier 3 cities. We see this gap again decreasing more and more, and that's of course the main outcome of the fact that the market is tight overall, and companies are looking for talent in all kinds of cities, and that's bringing more tightness to the availability of labor. So with that, I will leave the floor to my other esteemed colleague, and also to some questions. Pavel?
Olaf, thank you very much. Wojtek, thank you for providing the basic information on the findings of the report. Now we can move on to the question part. We have the journalists using different languages. The preferred language is English, but if someone is interested in asking a specific question, you can use also, looking at the number of journalists from Poland, you can use the Polish language, and we will also translate the question to other participants if they would be willing to provide the answer. So let me ask the question if there are any questions that you would like to start with the journalists participating in the event. Anyone would like to be the first? we also collected some of the questions in writing prior to this event. So maybe we will start with one to give more time to the journalists. Of course, a lot of questions is concerning the reaction of the sector to the crisis, and listening to how other sectors are closing down or limiting the employment. The basic question is, how about business services sector? Are there going to be any decisions that will release people to the market? Looking at the type of the question, maybe I could turn to Ania Berczyńska, representing ABSL Poland as the largest player in the CEE region. Anna, how do you see the situation of business services sector versus other sectors as far as the closing down or limiting the activities?
Thank you, Pavel. Good afternoon. Our sector, the services, by its nature, it's well prepared for the remote type of working. So the reaction compared to more location-dependent industries or sectors has been very quick, and we were able to adapt and adjust to the crisis management very quickly. In addition, by the tool set that we have equipped our employees with, and all the BCP measures that were well tested before the COVID, we were able not only to react, but also catch up with all the expectations and, let's say, numerous transaction or more complex roles in purpose to continue, let's say, the services without significant interruptions. And by the sector response, which we tested and interviewed within the ABSL community, it became obvious that majority of our companies have not been impacted by the COVID in terms of productivity or efficiencies.
I see that we are receiving written questions by the journalists in our chat box, so maybe I'll move to this one that we have just received. Can we evaluate if and how coronavirus will affect the supply of candidates? Until recently, there was a sort of shortage, and how is it going to look now? Maybe Tanya Dedeker from Randstad, if you could provide us with a global approach to talent in the situation of the crisis.
Yes, thank you for the question. What we are seeing is that there will be, because of Corona, there will be an increase of unemployed workers for sure. I mean, the numbers we are receiving now from the US, 30 million people unemployed. In EMEA, there will be an increase in unemployment. So there will possibly be more candidates available on the market to select from. On the other hand, I think it will be also a question of looking at the flexibility of some contracts, so that maybe clients will start using a different type of contract to continue to have that flexibility. So we do see a change where we would call it, first it was a candidate-driven market. We now see that it's more becoming a client-driven market, less than candidates.
Thank you very much. That's an important change. Moving on to the next question. Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Ukraine have been mentioned as popular locations, widening the choice for investors. Could you please give examples of big BSS projects launched in these countries? Looking at the nature of the question, most probably Olaf would be the appropriate person to provide the answer. Olaf?
Sure. Because I mean, we were part of it. So Egypt, there have been a number of new companies setting up centers, mainly close to Cairo, but also in Alexandria. So you have a group like Microsoft, who has expanded tremendously over the past 2-3 years. You have also the UK company Vodafone as a representative. You have also a certain number of new BPOs who have settled down there. Ukraine, it's everything between Kiev and Lvov, mainly with some US outsourcer, and some. I can name, for example, a French company, Teleperformance, who has settled there recently, and more companies also in Serbia, and down to Moldova. So we have a list of new companies having set up new operations there. Happy to provide this list to the person who has sent the questions, and to provide even more details and further details if needed.
Thank you very much, Olaf. The next question is most probably to Rafał from JLL. How do you think the COVID-19 pandemics will influence the demand of service sector for the new office space? Rafał.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Paweł. Yeah, so indeed there is going to be an impact, and the short-term impact that we expect will remain stable, in that the whole office re-entry program will enable people to get back to their workplaces in a safe way, which means an amount of office space will be allocated to, there will be a bigger amount of office space allocated to an individual employee, and this is going to be an immediate impact. However, in the long run, the lessons that we have learned, or we still actually are learning from the current crisis, is that the demand for office space may actually go down, and this is going to be substituted partly by home office and partly by any sort of flexible solutions that are going to appear in the market. They have been in place already for some time now. However, the new wave, or the wave that we are going through right now related to COVID and to the impact on the working environment, is going to to push up even more the take up of flexible office space. And as such, it's not that much about the headcount. So people are, as Anya was already mentioning, are not going to be impacted as much as the office space and the usage of space that we are used to. So the usage is going to change for sure.
Thank you very much, Rafał. One more technical remark. We see that some new journalists have joined our press conference. Please make sure to pin the view stream so you can see the whole streaming in a proper way. Now, back to the questions. Of course, the questions are concerning the influence of the COVID pandemics. How many projects have been given up because of COVID? I mean, new projects, new center locations, and how is the growth of the existing ones? Maybe I could ask this question to Wojtek Popławski, as you are from Poland, and then I would also ask Dragor Stefan from Romania. These are the two biggest markets, so maybe looking at these markets, we can have the conclusions about the number of projects decrease or increase during the COVID situation. Wojtek, if you could start.
I think it's difficult at this stage to link the current landscape and what is going on directly to COVID. I would rather say that it's a little bit accelerating what's happening today, the impact of the crisis that was actually coming, especially if you look at the global and regional macroeconomic data. And in my view, at least we can see a number of good examples that projects that just started, they are actually accelerating in a couple of days. They were able to move the recruitment into the digital channels. There's a lot of people who are actually starting their first work without actually meeting anyone physically and immediately getting into the trainings. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that number of companies will be actually looking if they want to open their centers only, or maybe they want to go more aggressively and combine the center project with a outsourcing component. But as with any crisis, I think that is a new normal that we already call that, right? We spend more time digitally than ever before, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it will disappear. So I believe that there will be projects coming. They might be a little bit reframed, and certain things might be accelerated, but this is going to continue. Companies will be looking for optimized cost position, ability to better compete at the lower margins, and with a lower growth.
Thank you, Wojtek. Dragos, how do you see it from the perspective of Romania, the second largest market in CEE region?
Hey everyone. So, bottom line, in my day-to-day job, I worked in a company's transition department. So let me tell you that nothing has stopped during the pandemic that we're facing right now. We're doing business as usual. We're getting new business. Of course, it's tougher because, well, the sales cycle has slowed down a bit from the perspective of acquiring new business. However, we're not losing clients. That's the major point and the key point here. Sure, some of our sectors have scaled down. Obviously, the services that we provide to the automotive industry, to the travel industry, to the air travel industry, these services have scaled down a bit, and we totally understand and we support our business partners in that initiative, and we rescale our services as such. However, we don't see a major decrease in in the rate of attrition of our clients, or in the rate that we're getting new services. I would say it's pretty on par to what we've experienced last year, since our industry is uniquely qualified to function on a remote premises as well as in the office. So I wouldn't see any major impact. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dragos. Actually, this question comes up more and more often, so maybe we could use it as a roundtable discussion and move on to the other countries to see how the situation is COVID related or not related. Ota, how is the Czech market in the last couple of months? Do you see any slowdown, or is there an interest in growing because of the crisis situation that may enable some other companies to get even more rooted in the Czech Republic?
No, we really don't see any decrease of the demand in the Czech Republic. I think that this is just opposite, because as most of our centers reacted quickly as any other region and switched into the work from home arrangement, many companies even are bringing some scope back home or closer to us, because they are looking for the business resilience. So as I said, we've run a few surveys among our members, and most of the members, they continue even recruitment. So we don't see much of the slowdown, but it's probably a little bit too early to say, because we will see how the trend will evolve in the next few months.
Thank you very much, Ota. Now we could move to the smaller markets that are not that very diversified and see the post-COVID reaction there. Fredis, how is Latvia reacting to the situation where there is at least a freeze? Did you see any direct influence of COVID? And if so, then how was it?
Thank you. First of all, I agree that it was quite a short time to evaluate the direct COVID impact on the market, but so far we don't see any demand decrease. I can only agree to what has mentioned before, that in some services we see actually increase. And I know that there is also some pipeline of new projects that are considering to enter Latvian market. and that's now something that also ABSL supporting Latvian Investment Agency in. Obviously, the first now what it was around slightly more than 2 months since we were work from home, and I can say from my own experience, the first month or so was obviously all the calendar was much focused on running existing operations and adjusting to the new normal. And I think now when we're past this first kind of shock of how to work in the new environment, we start more and more discussions. Okay, what's the future and how we're going to increase the business. So I think for Latvia and for GPS market as such, there is a good potential which we'll see in the nearest future, which for now it's harder to see because of some also logistic challenges of realizing new projects.
Thank you very much, Fredis. And last but not least, Adnan. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a newcomer to the SSC and BPO market. How would you describe the shock that COVID created and what were its influences?
Well, I can just confirm what my colleagues have shared. So we do see the increase in the interest to offshore work, and particularly bring it to the nearshore locations like Central Europe. The only exception I will say is that some IT companies, particularly IT software development companies, do expect to have some delays in the projects, especially the companies that did not start the major projects. They are expected to do some delays due to the COVID situation to better anticipate what's going on in the marketplace. But apart from it, the classical shared services, GBS services operations, we see increasing trend in demand.
Great, thank you very much. So we can all see that the business services sector is a crisis-proof, and the influence, although we should not be praising it, was rather stable. So if not the freeze, then even some of the companies are still hiring. In Poland, the recent research market shows that 42% of the companies are still hiring, and 12% of them has noticed the increase in the number of processes provided from Polish centers. We could move to the next question, which once again is concerning the workspace solutions. Please explain what kind of flexible solutions in offices the recent situation created. How about the solutions like Mindspace or WeWork? Are they going to gain from this situation? And that's probably to Rafał.
Yeah, thank you very much. So indeed, we see a very interesting situation in the market right now. So given the fact that the general notion of flex office space relates to the ability of a company to rent a space for a shorter period of time in a more flexible way. Typical lease contracts stretch for 5 years. And now here we have a bit of a hiatus between what's going on in Central Eastern Europe and in Western Europe. In Western Europe, flex solutions are used as a typical co-working space where one company can rent maybe 2 or 3 desks, or startup usually, or small medium-sized company would be renting 1 or 2 desks for 3 months and then scale up. In a Polish reality and in a whole Central Eastern European reality, we see flex providers as the ones who offer an extension of a regular office space. And by saying that, we mean that the only difference is that the lease terms and lease timing is shorter than the regular one. So in JLL's understanding, the impact on the flexible solutions is going to be following. Companies will be looking more intensely at flexible solutions, so solutions which will enable them to dismiss the contract or forfeit the contract faster than under the regular contract situation and circumstances. On the other hand, there will be a number of improvements done in the offices, those ones who are rented for a longer period of time, to help accommodate the amount of employees in a safe way, to help them work in a safe environment, in an environment which still needs to be a very friendly one. And this sort of scalability and answering the demand from the business and from the employees, those two elements have to be weighted in properly. This actually will be accommodated within this flex solutions. So solutions which will enable companies to take an additional 50 seats for half a year and then maybe shrink it down to 30 when needed, when more people are able to get back to their regular office. Those sort of solutions are going to be prevailing in the market. This is what we're hearing from our clients right now.
Thank you very much, Rafał. I think we still have time for one or two more questions. The next one is of a more general nature. Poland and other countries, what these days are the expectations of the investors and how have they changed? And I guess we could turn with this question to Candice from Deloitte.
Sorry, if I may, can I ask my my colleague Olaf to take that? It's more on the investor side, which he's
sure.
Close to. Thank you.
Okay, great. Then we can turn to Olaf.
Sure, guys. Thanks. So what investors are now requesting from countries like Poland, or like any other countries actually now post-COVID, is definitely more flexible labor regulations. In terms of working from home, as we all understand. There will be also a request from the investor to make sure that countries put together more flexible rules in terms of temp employment, in terms of ease of firing, unfortunately, but that will be the case. There will be also a demand or an expectation from investor that wherever they go, they want to make sure that all the infrastructure will be more robust than ever, and that has been already the case. And whether it is Poland or many other countries in Eastern Europe and elsewhere have greatly improved their infrastructure. But from city to cities, that might differ. And so investor and us as regulation strategy experts, we look at this aspect more and more carefully. And then there will be also a kind of request or a kind of expectation from the investor to look at more, even more into details in terms of agility of the talent, and how a candidate X can move to another position or can learn more quickly, more skills, or that will be also a specific request from investors to the different countries, that they need to make sure that they train their people very carefully and upgrade them to the level they want to find in the different countries, Western or Eastern European wise.
Thank you very much, Olaf. And I think we have still time for one more question. There is actually one really interesting, which is a reaction to what Tanya said at the beginning. Tanya, you mentioned that there may be a switch from the market of employees to the market of the employer. How do you think this will happen if we have heard from most of the countries that they are still hiring and there are new projects?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a contradiction. And I think it's a little bit like a bouncing ball that we are watching with this crisis. Therefore, there are multiple, and it's not an easy answer, but indeed, some industries continue to hire. They have not stopped. But everybody, each and everyone has suffered from this crisis. We have all lost months of revenue. And coming out of this crisis, we will have to take a look at our own talent. Who do we have? How can we flexibilize? How can we outsource services Because indeed, like Olaf was also mentioning, I mean, the legislation around labor and around talent continues to be way too stringent. And so people will start to look how to have a bigger layer of flexibility so they can ramp up and ramp down when needed. So indeed, hiring, yes, but there will be big amounts of, we will see bankruptcies of some companies. We will see companies, I mean, I just looked into the newspaper. You see airline companies firing thousands and thousands of people. So this is what we see happening. At the same time, if we then look to the global business services sector, I think it's going to be also an impact on, you know, the constant pressure on increasing the wages. I think that will be tempered. And at the same time, we will see a lower attrition. I think people will think twice now to change jobs because we are in a crisis and they will stay put. So I think that's a very positive upside when it comes to global business services. That's something that will help us. But I think the outcome will be that we will see an increase in unemployment. For how long those unemployment figures will be higher, we don't know. We believe, you know, all our numbers are showing that there will be an increase. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Tanya. We have started with a positive information from Olaf. The look at the talent market and the unemployment figures rising in the countries is not that much positive, but we think that at least the business services sector is a kind of stable element of global economy, even if we will not be shifting that many jobs in between the countries. This all leaves us with a rather positive outcome of the role of EMEA that was played in the recent crisis situation. So thank you all for participation, and please remember that the EMEA's Business Services Landscape report is ready for a download at the events webpage, as well as the web pages of all the partners of the publication. At the events webpage, we will also publish the questions and the answers. So if anyone wants to go back and see how the answers were provided and understand them deeper, you will be able to do it while looking at the recording of this session. Thank you very much, and please remember, and this is a remark to the journalists, that there are also individual countries reports provided by each of the ABSL organizations. So please follow these documents, follow organizations and partners of the EMEA report on the social media to learn more about the business services sector in current times. My name is Paweł Panczy, and I was the host of this press briefing. Thank you very much, and please stay in touch with us. Thank you.